welcome to Worried About Nothing. Today we're going to talk about chasing the happiness. I'm Katya.
And I'm Kim.
And I'm Danielle.
Welcome. Chasing the happiness. I think we've all been there, and we all at some point wanted to be happy. And I don't know what else to say.
Done. And we can all go about our day now. I agree. I think it's a human trait to constantly chase happiness or chase what we think will make us happy. It's always some distant goal. It's never something that we have right now, but it's always if I attain this, I'll be happy. Whether it be if I get that promotion or I get that job, I'll be happy. Or if I get that relationship, I'll be happy. Or if I lose weight, I'll be happy. Or any of the myriad things that it can be. And they never actually result in happiness because that is not the road to happiness. But as humans, I think we just chase it. It's like a constant goal. Happiness is the unattainable, the holy grail. Once we get the holy grail, everything will be different. Whereas because we're putting it on something that is outside of ourselves and actually we have no control over, and it's just a fleeting thing. Usually it's never something like, if I find inner peace, I'll be happy, or something that's actually more profound. It's usually putting that happiness label on something that happens, something that could be achieved or received or changed in some way. So it's always going to be fleeting. So if you get that promotion, you might be happy for a couple of minutes or a day or a week or 2 weeks. But then as soon as that fades, you'll be looking for a new goal. And the new goal will be, I need to get another job or another promotion or something else. And it's just this road to madness, I think, or I believe it is.
Yeah. It's a good way to really make sure that you're not happy or barely ever happy. Yeah.
And I think as a society, that's how we always want more. Now we need a bigger house. Now we need a bigger car. Now we need a bigger this, because there's always a goal to reach to. And it's interesting how as a society, everything gets bigger.
Yeah.
Right, bigger or more. It's not usually less of something. It's usually more of something, more money, more love, more cars. I don't know. More houses sometimes.
Exactly. But as you said, Kim, it's so temporary. And usually after that, there is an opposite emotion that comes in, right? So usually if, let's say, there is a big goal that you've been working for so many years and you really wanted to achieve, and you finally achieved it. So you might be happy, as you said, Kim, temporary. Once you achieved it and that's it, then you kind of fall to the ground and you either have to create another goal that is similar, bigger to that. Usually it's the largest goal. And then you have to work and achieve it. Otherwise, there's nothing to live for.
Yeah. And happiness is such a fleeting state. In my view, happiness is something that moves through and it's temporary. You can't be in the state of happiness always. And especially if you attach happiness to a thing, a material thing, or even if you attach, sometimes you see it in spiritual circles, people attach that feeling of happiness to their sense of, or their level of spirituality, or their belief in themselves as a spiritual person. And so sometimes you'll see posts like on social media of people who are feeling down or feeling not happy or not joyful, and they believe that there's something wrong with them and they need to get back to that state of happiness, rather than allowing that feeling of not happiness just to be, because everything has cycles. So it's like wishing that it's daytime all the time. It's not possible. Nighttime has to come too, and it's that putting things on happiness that make it unrealistic. Whereas if you just see it as something that sometimes you feel, sometimes you don't, and not attaching it to anything, whether it's some kind of story or some kind of material event or whatever, material thing, then you take the pressure off it. Because in some ways, as a society, we put so much pressure on this happiness thing. It's almost like the gold standard. You've made it if you finally got everything you want and you're happy, Whereas that's so unrealistic, because that's always looking outside of yourself for something that's else, something that's different. and not accepting who you are and where you are and what you're feeling now. So it's basically saying anything that is not happiness is wrong and bad. So, well, that's maybe 99% of your life, you just, completely dismissed it. And I suppose it depends on the definition of happiness as well, in that for me, I feel that contentment is more of a long-lasting thing because that's something that can just exist and be, whereas happiness can be more fleeting sometimes because it's like peaks as opposed to the steady feeling. And I guess it depends on, people attach so much to happiness. So there's so much of that, I'll be happy when, or I'll be happy if. And it can cover so many things. So it can be, I'll be happy when, if it's material or spiritual or whatever it is, but there's often I'll be happy when I've achieved something or reached something or released something, or in a spiritual sense, it can sometimes, I've seen or experienced myself as well. Sometimes, there can be that mind thought of, I'll be happy when I've let go of that block that's, ruining my life. That's what's stopping happiness, as opposed to just going, it's a block, I'll release it and it's fine and life will go on. It's that kind of putting some kind of prize at the end. It's that kind of happiness will be achieved when. And it's always that future looking and that kind of going out of yourself into some unknown future that you can't predict or control, but the happiness stamp will kind of try and do that. Be like, well, my life will be sorted and I'll be happy when this has happened and my box has been ticked, whatever.
Yeah, that's so accurate for my experience, Kim, is putting that stamp of happiness somewhere into the future. And I don't know, it's not working. I'll say that. It doesn't work well for me. And I guess I could share just like some of the things that have come up for me in terms of like what those things are that I put into the future, right? So I'll be happy when I wake up. And that's in like the spiritual sense, right? So that kind of is having me negate all of the experiences I'm having along this journey of spiritual experiences, all of the things that don't feel so spiritual. But like you said, I'll be happy when I release this block, but then I'm not necessarily fully being with the block because I'm projecting into like, well, just till I get past this. It's that whole kind of theme of, I just want to get this over with, which is really not what life is about at all, which I'm learning more and more about. Yeah, that's a tough one. That's a real tough one for me.
I think it's a really deeply ingrained one. Because speaking for myself, I recently realized I had this subconscious belief that bad, in inverted commas, bad things that happen have to be endured. So that you have to just suffer them and go through the pain, and it has to be painful and it has to be difficult. I had that subconscious belief that I realized recently it doesn't have to be that way at all. So in a similar way to what you're saying, instead of kind of looking to some future point where the endurance is finished because I've got through it, it's going, well, no, I can actually enjoy life right now, even though I'm going through this thing or I'm experiencing this thing. Because that's not the focus. That's just something that's happening. So it's kind of like saying, oh, I'm not going to enjoy nature because there's clouds in the sky. You can still enjoy it, but it's just not sunny. It's just it's a different thing. But I think we do have, a lot of us are brought up with this belief that there's some standard and there's some level of having to reach this standard. Even in terminology, it's like climbing the ladder at work. You have to reach that goal. You have to get to the top. Rather than just do your work that you enjoy or whatever it, that's a bad example, but yeah, it's insane. It's insanity really, because we don't know what's going to be at the other side of that block, So let's say if we say, well, we believe that I'll be happy when something spiritual happens, I'll be happy when I've cleared this block. You don't know what's going to happen when you clear that block. Things might go in a completely different direction to what you thought in your mind is what's going to happen and what happiness will then be, So you might clear that block and then go, oh, I've realized that something completely different. I'm going to go down that road. I'll become a sailor instead of a chef or whatever, But we can't predict or know. And that's going back to our last podcast. It's kind of, that's part of the control aspect of it, because we're trying to control our own happiness by predicting it and putting it in such a narrow little box, going, I will control it. So the happiness only means that, can only be a result of that thing that action that I've taken or that thing that's happened or I've done. Whereas happiness can sometimes, for me, just speaking for myself, sometimes I can be walking down the street and just feel such happiness and such joy for no reason. And there's no kind of, oh, I've crossed the street, therefore I'm feeling happy, or I'm wearing blue, so I'm happy, or anything like that. It can just sometimes happen. I'm glad about that, because there were times, in the past when I would have been much more growing up, or at least my generation it was instilled in you that you had to follow the pattern. You had to get married at this age and you had to have 2.2 kids and then you'd be happy and then you'd whatever. And none of that happened for me. So when those kind of landmarks came and went, there was a lot of, oh no, what's happening to happiness now? This is what's supposed to have happened in my life, but it hasn't. Oh God. Will I ever be happy now?
Right. This means now that I can't be happy? And you get this question mark in your head. You're like, it doesn't feel that way.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And as a society, we put so much on happiness. And it's interesting that actually we put so much on happiness, but we're not feeling happy.
Yeah.
We're willing to feel miserable, or we're willing to suffer because it's comfortable. We're willing to be there, and we actually want to be there because it's a familiar pattern. And we want to have happiness, something that happens in the future. So if you think about it, then we're really never happy, because we're just really comfortable to suffer, and we're just comfortable to think that happiness is something that may happen if something else happens. So when do you have the time to enjoy the happiness and be happy?
Exactly.
When?
I know.
Never.
It's crazy. It's true, because the suffering can be so enjoyable sometimes. It's like, oh, I'm really working for this. I'm paying for it.
I'm doing it for my happiness.
I'll say something to that, though, because suffering can be a really great motivator, can motivate you to do certain things. Like, so for me, I might step up my spiritual practice if I feel like I'm suffering, where if I feel like I'm just feeling good, I'll be like, oh, I don't really need to do this right now or today. So I find, at least as much as it sucks, because, suffering is no fun, it can be a motivating force for me. So that sort of projection into the future, I just kind of wanted to touch upon too what I had brought up, in that we have these patterns and stuff while we're here, the things that motivate us and keep us embodied and incarnated on this planet. So there's almost like this fear to let go of certain stories that keep me in suffering, because it's that fear of death, I guess, because it's like, well, if I don't have this, what will I be? What will I do? And it's kind of just feels like you'll just disappear, which is really what I want, right?
Yeah, of course. But I would say there are different levels of suffering. So if it's something that you're familiar and you can kind of manage, then you're okay with it. But if it gets to that unmanageable state, then that's when you get to the spiritual path, and you really, as you said, Danielle, it's a great motivator. It's the same for me. I would be okay. And the moment suffering comes in, that's when I start investigating. That's when I might go and meditate. That's when I start doing, some other processing techniques. So as you said, Danielle, it's definitely a great motivator, but there is levels to it. And I think the more cautious we become, the more aware we become, the less suffering we're willing to tolerate. So something as was very subtle suffering and very little suffering, at the beginning we wouldn't even notice it. I was like, oh, no, I'm fine. I'm actually pretty happy. And the more you see, and I guess don't live in the way that you used to live, where you live in this suffering all the time, then you get to the stage where you start noticing it.
Yeah, no, I agree. Absolutely. The more you pay attention and are aware of it, the more you see the subtle suffering. Because sometimes at the beginning, all you see is, the great big block that's hitting you in the head, but you don't notice the slight, the little jab in the arm kind of thing. But yeah, it's becoming aware of that. And I think the more, for me, I'm not saying I'm in any way an expert at this by a long shot, but for me, I feel that the more I surrender and let go of things, the easier it all gets. I feel with suffering, it's like the more you push against suffering, the more you try and resist suffering or don't want to change it in any way, the tighter it gets. It's like it's a constrictive belt around you, and the more you kind of try and get rid of the belt, the tighter it gets, you know. Whereas if you relax and kind of breathe in and whatever it is, you breathe out, the belt loosens and kind of then you can take that moment and let it slide or let it go. But the more subtle sufferings definitely are so hidden by the big sufferings that sometimes when they come up, you're not even aware of it. And then when you become aware of it, you're like, wow, that's been going on this whole time underneath the loud, shouty suffering that I hadn't realized. Wow. And that's interesting. It's quite fascinating sometimes to see. But I think also, like you said, Danielle, sometimes we can really want something, that thing that will make us happy, in inverted commas, but then we fight against it as well because we don't want it. You know, you can have that conflicting thing of, I really want it, but I don't. So I'm going to push it away and suffer, but pretend I want it. I mean, want it, but not kind of fully want it, if you know what I mean. So sometimes there can be some subconscious beliefs around it. So like one thing that came up for me recently was that I've wanted to lose weight for quite a while because I put on a lot of weight. And I was trying to, but there was just such resistance and I couldn't quite work out why. And I was trying to focus on it and it didn't help focusing on it because that was kind of really constrictive, you know. And then when I took a step back and I just allowed myself to be with it, the whole confusion of it, I realized there was a subconscious belief there that was telling me that I didn't have permission to lose weight. And I had no idea that was there. But that was basically fighting this desire to lose weight the whole time. And I didn't really know. So it wasn't happening for me because it was the desire to lose weight on the surface. But underneath there was this belief going, no, you can't, you're not allowed, you can't, you know. So it didn't happen for me. So now that's cleared. We'll see what happens. Who knows? There might be more beliefs buried under that one. But that was interesting that came up because I hadn't realized. Yeah, it was there. There can be all sorts of crap in there, can't they? You know, all sorts of beliefs are like, oh no, I'm going to contradict everything you think you want. You know.
It might be the fact that you don't want to experience that happiness, right?
Yeah.
You actually want the happiness, but you don't want the experience of it, the true happiness.
Yeah.
Because it can be quite unfamiliar, something that you have never really experienced, because you might have experienced polarized happiness where you're just on the top of the emotional ladder. You know what I mean? It's like if you look at the waves, you're on the top of the wave because it's just so much excitement, which I don't really call happiness. And then you fall down where there is so much misery. But you haven't really experienced that beautiful, neutral happiness. And you really don't want to experience it because it's, unfamiliar territory.
For me, I don't believe that losing weight will make me happy, but that's a good point because I feel that maybe people don't always know what happiness really is, you know, in the, like you say, that beautiful neutral happiness. Because a lot of people are looking for the high. They're looking for that kind of the top of the wave when you feel like you're on top of the world and everything's perfect and you're full of adrenaline and excitement and all of these things that doesn't last because, like you say, like the wave, it will always crash. But it's finding that, I guess what I was calling contentment earlier, you know, just finding that neutral middle ground where it doesn't even matter. You know, it's kind of everything's what it is and it doesn't matter. That people maybe don't see as happiness. So they always dismiss it or aren't even aware of it or don't see it as something that they want. And I guess it's kind of unraveling everything that's attached to it as well. So like for me with losing the weight, you know, that I know there were associations for me that, like in my 20s when I was thin, I used to get a huge amount of male attention that was not always pleasant. And so there's still some stuff around that I need to work through. And then there's other reasons. And there's, you sometimes eat, or I sometimes eat to cover things up or as a comfort, or, you know, you want to push things down. And so there's a bit of a semi-conscious fear that as I lose weight, all that stuff will come up because it's going to have to come out, you know, and I'm thinking, oh God, I have to face that. There can sometimes be all sorts of conflicting things that come up. We shall see what happens there. So, yeah.
Well, I could say something about contentment because that's kind of, we were talking about the more still kind of happiness instead of having the peaks, those highs. And I don't know what I was going to say about it now.
I had so many ideas floating by and then I forgot about them.
I know, me too.
And I'm trying to find it, and I'm trying to find it and catch it. Actually, it was while you're speaking that it's just completely gone. I was like, what was that I wanted? It was really important, and it's just gone.
It may come back. It may not.
But it's just funny how the things appear and you think it's important and it's gone. I was like, what was that about? Was it really important? It's very much talks about happiness.
Yeah, no, it's true. That's a good example. Absolutely. It's the importance you put on things, whether it's remembering something or whether it's happiness or whatever it is. We put so much importance on it. And it's that thing that has to be said or has to be achieved or has to be experienced. And then when you forget about it, it doesn't even leave a memory. It doesn't even leave anything. You just like, oh, I don't know. And then if you remember it later, like, oh yeah, I used to think that I really wanted that and that would make me happy. You're like, what? Why? And sometimes getting the things that you think will make you happy. I mean, it's like, I remember when I was a small child, I used to really want this Barbie doll that had black hair. If I got that now, it would not make me happy.
You wouldn't want that, Kim.
It's like, take it away. I'll give it to you for free. I don't need it.
But I remember I threw a tantrum in the shop because my mum wouldn't buy it for me. I was like, but I need it to be happy. I want it so much.
That's so funny. I remember stuff like that too with toys as a kid, wanting something so badly. Sometimes getting it and then being like, why did I want this? Because the commercials always make it seem so fun, right? It's like, oh man, it's all exciting and everything. Again, chasing that, like, I guess, happiness high. And you get the toy and you're like, I'm not experiencing the commercial. My room didn't turn into rainbows and no unicorns.
But now we're talking about the pattern. This is how it's being engraved in us since the childhood, since the commercial, because they show you, they're like teasing you and saying, hey, you want to have this lollipop? You have to go and buy it and then you'll be happy. So I don't think we can blame ourselves. There's so much that is engraved in society and how I think this whole word and economics works, because people want things because their neighbors have it or because they've seen it on the commercial. But it's not actually true wanting, because if you look inside yourself, then if you ask yourself this question, is it truly what you want? And then you truly listen to yourself, then it might not be. It might not be the case. Many times I want certain things and then I have to go back and ask, will it really make me happy? And certain things might be challenges, like a doll. Recently I wanted to have a doll, like a special kind of doll that has, I don't know, Philip doll. I don't know, it's a Japanese type. And I was like, why do I need it? But then if it's something for playful, just to be playful and enjoying it, then maybe it's okay to have a doll. I'm not going to just reject something because it has to be practical. So it's kind of interesting. But it's not that and then I have to ask, why do I want it? Because it looks pretty? What am I going to do with it? Am I really going to play with it, or is it just going to sit on the shelf? So anyway.
Yeah, that's good. That's a very good point. There is that selling of a lifestyle, that marketing, because we're constantly bombarded with marketing. Even if we don't watch TV, but if we do, oh my God, there's so much. But even in life, there's so much marketing that if you buy this, it'll give you the lifestyle that comes along with it, because everything is just selling a lifestyle. It's not just selling an object. So like if, shampoo adverts are not just, you'll have clean hair. You'll have beautiful blonde hair and suddenly you'll turn into this model with massive boobs. It's kind of, people go, oh yes, must do that. And it's crazy. And so there's so much of that. And so I think it's a good point, like you say, to just ask yourself if you really want it, or whether it's collective consciousness desire, or whether it's a surface desire because you're subconsciously going, yes, I want big boobs, so I must buy that shampoo.
Yeah, right.
That's a good point. Subconsciously you want big boobs. I like that.
And that is interesting though, because I see, a lot of people dye their hair blonde, and I wonder if there's some sort of connection with that, because I know at least growing up for me, that was kind of the all-American standard of beauty, was this, blonde, blue-eyed supermodel. And I see a lot of people dye their hair blonde, And so it's just interesting to think, once I have the blonde hair, that'll be me. That'll be my story, and I'll never have blonde hair. But
it's interesting because I used to have blonde hair, and I remember when I decided to grow my own hair, there was one older lady that I kind of knew, and then she came by and she said, oh, you looked much better with blonde hair.
Oh, geez. Hey, thanks.
Yeah, but again, that's a stereotype, isn't it? There's that preconception. And I think going back to what I was saying about weight loss, there's so much around weight loss as well that, when you lose the weight, you'll suddenly be beautiful and you'll suddenly get that man of your dreams and you'll suddenly change body shape completely, And there's all of that goes along with it. So people can sometimes, if they're not losing weight for the sake of wanting to lose weight from just a health perspective or whatever it is perspective, if they hold on to these desires, there can sometimes be so much disappointment. You hear people talking about it that, they might lose 3 or 4 stone and they're looking exactly the same, except 3 or 4 stone lighter. They're expecting this massive transformation into Barbie or something, And that's what we do. Everything is sold to make us more popular or more beautiful or more attractive to the opposite sex, So everything is about that. And it's just this constant bombardment of bullshit that doesn't make us happy, but we're just trained from birth that happiness is looking for something else or changing something about ourselves or being different, in some way. It's never, you are beautiful the way that you are and it's great. It's always, oh no, you're all right, but you need this to make yourself better, or to make yourself more attractive. Or even as children, it's kind of like, well, you need this doll set because then your friends will want to play with you. Not kind of, your friends will always want to play with you because you're a lovely person, And it's insane that we just accept this. It's not even subliminal, it's kind of obvious, really. But because we're so bombarded with it, I guess it seeps in, And again, it's crazy. I keep using this word, but it's crazy.
Well, it is. And I think a lot to do even with Hollywood, how we have an idea of this blonde, beautiful model because it's being engraved in us since we're little children. And that's all you see. That's the standard of beauty. Because I think if we look in history, at some point, the standard of beauty was when the lady was bigger.
Yeah.
Because then I think the lady is not starving and
she's fertile. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So it's whatever is engraved in us.
Yeah. And the crazy thing about that as well, like you say, is it always changes. So if the ideal of beauty was constant over the centuries, at least there would be that standard, but it changes every few years or even every year. If you look at what the standards of beauty say in Hollywood were over the decades, they're completely different. So you have, goes from Twiggy to J-Lo shape to whatever it is, and it's completely different year to year, decade to decade. And it's crazy because the standard just changes. It's so ephemeral and ridiculous that people follow it, and that's what's sold. And because it changes all the time, because people have to sell things and change things, otherwise people will stop buying. It's always going to be a constant, everything, the goal always changes. So you're never going to achieve the goal, because once you get to that original goal, it'll have changed. Suddenly it's, oh no, it's not the car. No, you need to buy a truck now, or you need to buy a train or something to be happy.
Yeah, the goalposts are always moving.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because instead of in the society finding the happiness internally, and once you discover happiness with yourself, then you might see that happiness in somebody else or that beauty in somebody else. Because you're already happy, then you don't need to look outside. That's definitely, it's completely forgotten. And it seems like we're being kept away from that. So we don't realize that there is a happiness inside of ourselves.
Yeah, that's so true. And when you touch that happiness inside yourself, you realize that all of the things you might once have thought you wanted are completely irrelevant. So unimportant, not at all enriching you to your life or meaningful in any way. It's like you were saying earlier, forgetting things you wanted to say, you just forget about it all because it's so irrelevant. And I feel that in all aspects of life, that it's the letting go that's the important thing, So anytime you have a goal for something that you hook some feeling of happiness or joy or contentment or achievement onto, is never going to happen for you. So it's just letting go of all the emotion attached to it. And if it happens, it happens. I mean, you can work towards a goal, certainly, but without believing that when this goal happens, everything will change or something will change or be different. But just doing it by being with it in the moment. It's like, well, let's say you want to move house. Yeah, work towards it, but don't hook everything onto it. Or if you want to attain a spiritual level of some kind, do the work, but don't have that desperation you sometimes see, like in groups on Facebook where people are kind of saying things like, I'm not enlightened, so I want to kill myself, and it's kind of like, well, those are two very, very different things. It's kind of, you can't hook immediate gratification onto something. It doesn't immediately happen. Sometimes you have to work with things. Sometimes they happen in their own time.
That's coming back to, I think, to the addictions, because you want it right now. You don't want to actually experience anything, which is what enlightenment is to experience everything, all your misery as well. You just want immediate happiness. And this is what happens when people go on drugs, because they just want it right away. They want that experience, right? And which is...
Yeah. And I think it can also be a misinterpreting or a misunderstanding of what things are, so like the way that Aratima teaches, enlightenment is not a state to achieve, it's a shift in perception, so people work and fight to get to that enlightened state, thinking they need to do something, and achieve something, whereas it's just a shift in seeing, which is a very different energy, and people, by misunderstanding that, I mean, I'm not talking as an expert in any way, but, by people misunderstanding that, the mind can convince them of all sorts of things. You sometimes see people in groups fighting over the fact that they're enlightened and you're not, and so-and-so makes them enlightened and so-so doesn't, and you think, well, none of you are, clearly, because you're not seeing things clearly. But it can be the same with thing as well, so people that see a certain standard of beauty as being the ultimate can sometimes hate themselves so much that they will then remake their body. They'll go under plastic surgery or whatever it is, or extreme diets or whatever, to try and make themselves into that mold of what they believe is beauty, which is completely missing the point of beauty. Beauty is, for me, beauty is acceptance of what and who you are. So somebody who's really beautiful to me is somebody who radiates their essence and who is so in their own skin and happy in their own skin that they're stunning. It's not this external plastification that makes no difference, because if the person underneath it is not beautiful, it doesn't matter what the outside is, and it's irrelevant. It's like, your hair, you're kind of, it's just hair, it's not who you are. So I think misunderstanding can often be a problem or an issue with happiness as well. Not understanding what it is that you are chasing. You're chasing happiness, but you don't even know what it is you're chasing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And we have a separate podcast on beauty as well, if our listeners would like to listen to that. So please tune in.
Oh, good marketing. Perfect. But I guess, happiness is a funny one, because it's one of those polarized things that if you're chasing happiness, you're clearly not happy. And you're very much in the opposite of happiness. There's no acceptance of whatever is going on with you or whoever you are right then in that moment. So, it's a strange one. It's chasing the opposite when you're trying to get away from where you are, but not accepting it.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that, because it's like you're not accepting that you're not happy right now.
Yeah.
I feel like that's accurate, is that people who they're focused on chasing this happiness, they don't even realize, or they don't even want to look at the fact that where they are currently, they're not happy. Like there's some sort of guilt or shame or something around it, that they can't even stand to accept the fact that they're not happy. It's such a weird dynamic, but like I can definitely see that, especially from my own experience. It's like, oh, I want this happiness. So then clearly that would mean that I'm not experiencing that now, but yet I'm not willing to accept that I'm unhappy in my current circumstances.
I just wanted to add something when you were talking about the results, Kim, and what I've recently experienced when I was working on a project. Sometimes the thought will come in, oh, it's taking so much time, or, might go into the direction where it doesn't make me happy because I'm just expecting the results. But the moment I shift my perspective and say, hey, I'm actually enjoying doing this hard work, and the more I do it, there is more enjoyment in it. And that shift in perspective changes everything, because then instead of suffering and thinking when it's going to end, when I'm going to see the results, I'm just enjoying doing what I'm doing. And that changes completely. That's like living life instead of, sure, you might have the goal, whatever, pass the exam. But if you can find some sort of enjoyment in studying what you're studying, so hopefully people, when they do study, they selected that particular subject because they had interest in it. So if you can find a bit of enjoyment in it and then you pass the exam, okay, great. Then it's a shift in perspective, right? Then you're enjoying what is,
Yeah.
even though it's hard work.
Yeah, it's being present with it. It's being with it rather than denying it and pushing it away and going, well, I'll step on this thing that I'm doing now to get to the next step, which you won't get to unless you do the thing that you're doing now. So you might as well enjoy the thing that you're doing now, because you have to do it anyway. But yeah, like you say, sometimes it's funny how easy that can be, and that sometimes we make things so complicated. We make this big, I will be happy when this, and I'll whatever, and I want this, and I want that. And then when you shift perception, just like that, it's as easy as falling off your bed. Everything changes, and that's all it is. It's just a shift in perception changes everything. And that's what life is about. It's just seeing it truly. So you can go from this fake seeing, and you take the dirty sunglasses off and you're like, oh yeah, of course, happiness isn't out there, it's here, it's within. And it's just so easy. But I think we like to complicate things and make such a big thing out of everything. It has to be difficult, or it has to be complicated, or it has to be torturous, or it has to be far in the future, or it has to be whatever. Whereas it's here and now if you just look at it differently and just allow yourself to be with it, and then find that contentment or happiness or whatever, and everything that's not real and not important just falls away, and you're just like, yeah, all that noise chatter is just bullshit. I'm just sitting here in my little zen-like state, feeling perfectly okay.
I just thought it was really interesting how beauty came up so much on this podcast where we're talking about happiness, because it seems like a lot of the times our happiness can be really tied into like the way we look or the way that we feel we look. And I noticed over time how the goalposts were moving on what is beautiful. And I was like, well, what really makes me want to be physically attractive? I would ask myself, and it was more about the way I thought I would feel when I felt beautiful. So what I decided to do instead was muster up that feeling for myself. How would I feel if I felt like I was beautiful? And what it felt like for me, at least, is kind of like when you have the sun shining on your face and you're sitting there and you're, feeling all warm, and it's just almost like, it's kind of a sense of wholeness. It's like you don't really need anything else. You're just completely content at where you are. So I'm like, okay, well, that's what I felt like, beauty or outward beauty would bring me. So I was just like, and you just feel totally fine. Kind of like what you said, Kim, everything just falls away. It's like once you have that feeling, and it's a feeling, nothing had changed. I didn't do my hair, I just sat there and I said, how would I feel if I felt beautiful? And all of that sort of warmth and fullness and wholeness started to come up, and it's just like everything else didn't matter.
Yeah, I know what you're saying, because I feel for me, beauty, true beauty, is from the heart. So it's like recognizing the beauty of nature. Everything's different, everything's unique, but it's beautiful because it's itself, and feeling or perceiving yourself as beautiful is feeling love for yourself. Whereas the external standards of beauty are the opposite of love for yourself, because they are, you must be different, you must change. Whereas when you're in the heart, from my experience, when I'm in the heart and I feel love for myself, I feel stunning. I feel like I'm absolutely radiant, I'm beautiful, because it's not about the outside, even though the outside can sometimes reflect the inside, but it's just, I'm feeling love, and I am love. Therefore, of course, it's beautiful, because love is so stunning. Love is beautiful and glorious. So it's like you say, it's that feeling and that perception. So instead of looking at myself in the mirror and going, oh, my features do not match what the standard of beauty these days says they should, I just look at myself and go, I can see love coming from my eyes. I'm smiling because I'm feeling joy. So that is incredibly beautiful, and it's that acceptance of the truth of it, as opposed to chasing the shadows that live outside. It's like, that quote by Aratima that she said a few years ago, and it comes up as a memory every so often on Facebook, and I'll post it occasionally. She said something, I'll paraphrase slightly because I've forgotten the exact wording, but something like, don't leave the stillness of who you are to find yourself in the infinite mirrors of the world. And that's so perfect, because that's really where happiness lies. It's inside, it's in the heart, it's within you. And love and beauty and all of those things are all connected. It's all the same. Whereas so many of us will run out and try and look in all these different mirrors that are broken and fragmented and don't show a real reflection. and obviously will then have reflected back to them something that's not beautiful because they're going outside of themselves to try and find something that doesn't even exist. It's an illusion, so I feel that quote is just so beautiful, and I love it because it's so true, and it just helps me remember just to be in that stillness of who I am, because who all of us are is beautiful. We're all perfect as we are. So why try and change that to fit in with somebody's opinion of what we should be?
And you know what I've noticed? That usually some of the most beautiful people are the ones that have problems with their beauty, are the ones that constantly need to keep that standard, maybe because people told them that they're beautiful, and they constantly feel that they need to work on themselves to stay that beautiful.
Yeah.
So that's kind of interesting.
Yeah. And they can't accept the fact that aging makes them, in inverted commas, less beautiful in their eyes. Whereas aging really makes you more beautiful because your wisdom shines out, your life experiences shine out, but because it's that plastic, you must look 21 when you're 80. Believe it's crazy. So you see these old ladies who should be nice and wrinkled and, rosy, and all of these really stretched faces that just are completely unnatural. There's no expression, there's no life there.
That's true. It's not actually beautiful. It would be more beautiful to see the actual wrinkles. But if people can see that and recognize it.
Yeah.
But it's really hard to accept it because that's not what we've been told since we were little kids, right?
Yeah.
What we see in Hollywood, right? The same people, they pretty much never change, although we know the reason why. But, that's kind of, you always have to stay beautiful. You always have to stay young.
Yeah. And if you believe what some people are saying about the transgender of Hollywood, men are actually women and women are actually men, that causes even more of a rift, because there's no way you can look like a man who's now a woman if you're a woman. Adds even more bonkers, unreachable, unattainable standards there.
That was our conversation about chasing the happiness. Thank you for listening to us today. Please subscribe. Please hit that bell button so you can get our next podcast, and like us. And until the next time, bye.